This is not just a book, because it carries a dangerous secret inside, and those who learned about it did not live for very long. Because this story has the power to shake a major belief and rewrite history. When it first appeared, it was not only rejected, it was banned by the Vatican. This is the story of the Gospel of Barnabas. It was hidden for centuries, but as reactions grew, they introduced another fake book under the same name to discredit it. But other copies of this book were claimed to be found in Turkey and Cyprus. And of course, they are very different from the version that was presented. In this video, we will follow the real Gospel of Barnabas. This will be one of the most special videos we have ever made. You are watching Religious Story TV. To not miss videos like this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and write in the comments which country you are watching from. If you are ready, let's begin. Today, there are 4 Gospels accepted in the world: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But history tells us something important. After Eesa, especially in the first centuries, there were many different Gospels in circulation. Some of them were similar to each other, but some of them were telling completely different things. The Gospel of Barnabas was one of these different texts. According to some claims, this book was saying the opposite of the accepted story. It said that Eesa was not the Son of God, that he was not crucified, and that a prophet would come after him. Now stop and think about this for a moment. If such a text was really circulating in the early period, this is not just an alternative opinion. This is something that could directly affect the foundation of belief. Throughout history, powerful systems usually react in the same way to things that challenge them. They destroy them, hide them, or make them look unimportant. The original text disappeared. Later, a different version was presented. This version was called fake, and the whole topic was discredited. So the goal was not only to hide it, but also to control how people see it. There is also an important detail here. The version of the Gospel of Barnabas known today is in Italian. This raises a serious question. Did Barnabas know Italian? No. He lived in the 1st century, and the language he most likely spoke was Aramaic. So the question becomes clear. If the text we have today is only a translation, where is the original? There is no clear answer to this. So the book you see today, under the name Barnabas, cannot be confirmed as original. Even if it is called a translation, there is no known original text. This creates confusion and can mislead people. However, according to some research and claims, the real text may not have been completely lost. It may have remained hidden or controlled. This is where the story becomes more complex, because this is not only about an old book. Some claims connect this topic to secret excavations in Turkey, night operations in Cyprus, texts that appeared and disappeared, and even reports of deaths. So who is at the center of all this? Who was Barnabas? Was he really one of the closest people to Eesa, or was he a name that was later pushed out of history? To answer these questions, we first need to understand the person, because the best way to understand a text is to understand the one who is said to have written it. Barnabas, for many people today, just a name. But for early Christianity, he was a very important figure. His real name, Yusuf, but the title given to him, Barnabas, meaning son of encouragement or one who encourages. Even this gives us a clue about his character. Both meanings show how accurate this name was for him in the years ahead. He was born in Cyprus, into a Jewish family. At that time, Cyprus was in the middle of the Mediterranean, under the long shadow of the Roman Empire, a place where trade routes and beliefs met. Yusuf was born into a family from the tribe of Levi, serving in the temple. Barnabas was one of the first people to meet the message of Isa alayhi salam. In sources, his name is mentioned among the early believers, and once he accepted it, he never turned back. For this belief, he left Cyprus, went to new lands, told people, and spread the message. Barnabas was not just a follower. He was someone who brought people together, supported them, and tried to spread the belief. And he became one of the leading figures in the early Christian community. Even in today's Christian sources, he is considered important. But there is a critical detail here. Barnabas is not described the same way in every source. According to some, he was an apostle. According to others, he was not one of the 12 apostles, but he was a very close follower in the first circle. So what is clear is this: Barnabas saw Eesa and lived in the same time as him, and he directly heard his message. This separates him from many other writers, because this cannot be said for most of the gospel writers we have today. Almost all of them were written by later generations who never saw Eesa. And because of this, if there is truly a text belonging to Barnabas, that text is not an ordinary story. It would be a first-hand witness, and it would become a primary source, much more important than the current Gospels. One of the most important turning points in Barnabas's life crosses with another name, Paul. This name is extremely critical, both for what he did and for today's understanding of Christianity. He is one of the most influential figures in Christian history. But here is the interesting part. Barnabas and Paul were together for a time. They traveled together. In the early period, before Paul changed, they spread the message. They preached in the same cities. But then something happened. A serious disagreement appeared between them, and this disagreement was not just personal. According to some accounts, this separation was about belief itself, about who Eesa really was and how his message should be understood. Now think about this. If two important figures separate while spreading the same message, this is not a simple argument. This is the beginning of two different paths. On one side, Paul; on the other side, Barnabas. And history shows us this. Today's understanding of Christianity followed completely the path shaped by Paul, and Paul interpreted Christianity in his own way, in a form suitable for the Roman pagan world, so it could spread more easily. We will go into details about Paul soon, but let's look a little more at Barnabas's path. Although there is no exact information about the end of Barnabas's life, he continued to spread the message of Eesa. At that time, the Romans were putting strong pressure on Christians, and according to the widely accepted view, he returned to Cyprus and he was killed there. According to some accounts, he became a target because he was spreading his belief, and in the end, he was silenced. But something very interesting happened. Paul, who had conflicts with him and who spread the idea of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, continued his path with growing power and even with the support of pagan Rome. The first century of Christian history, known as the Age of the Apostles, begins in Jerusalem around 33 after Eesa and ends around 100 in Anatolia with the death of the last apostle. In this 70-year period, the name of Barnabas appears many times. As we mentioned at the beginning of the video, Barnabas traveled with Paul to Cyprus and Anatolia to spread their beliefs. They walked together, spoke together, and worked together. But Paul, using his strong intellectual background, began to build a new theology. Barnabas, on the other hand, wanted to pass on what he heard and saw, exactly as it was, without adding or removing anything. After this separation, when Barnabas returned to Cyprus, he became a target, especially after becoming the founder of the Church of Cyprus. He continued to spread the message of Eesa on the island, but this message did not please everyone. At that time, there was a strong Jewish community in Cyprus. What Barnabas was teaching was seen as a threat by them. In the end, they took action. Barnabas was killed and his body was thrown into a swamp. But his students did not stop. Without anyone seeing them, quietly, they took his body out of the swamp, and they brought him to a place where no one could easily find him. A cave near the ruins of Salamis. They buried him quickly, and Barnabas became part of the earth. But there was something on him, on his chest, a book, the Gospel of Barnabas. This book is not just a text. It is an alternative account of the message of Eesa, and maybe because of this, it has always been debated throughout history. So how did this book survive from that day until today, and how was it found? Here, a very interesting story appears. In the year 477, the bishop of Cyprus and Turkey had a strange dream one night. In his dream, Saint Barnabas appeared and said, "My grave is in that place. Come and find me." And Turkey took this dream seriously. He went with his team near the ruins of Salamis, and they found it inside a cave, a tomb, inside the tomb, bones, and on the bones, at the level of the chest. That object was still there, a handwritten gospel. This discovery was reported to Emperor Zeno. The emperor granted independence to the Church of Cyprus and gave a large donation. With that money, the Barnabas monastery, which still stands today, was built. The bones and the gospel were sent to Antioch, and from there to Istanbul. Then they were delivered to the Church of Rome, and here the darkest part of the story begins, because that gospel was never shown to the public again. Every year on June 11th, the Christian world celebrates St. Barnabas Day. Churches mention his name, hymns are sung, prayers are made. But no one asks this question out loud. Where is the gospel written by this man? Barnabas is accepted as a saint in the Christian world, but the book said to be written by him, the one found on his chest, protected by his students at the cost of their lives, was banned for centuries. At one time, during the Inquisition in Spain, it is known that people who even mentioned the name Barnabas were given the death penalty. Just a name, just saying a name, and the punishment was death. This gospel was found in Cyprus, and a copy was also found in Turkey. We will tell that story as well, but before that, we need to understand something. What did Paul do? And why did he leave the teachings of Eesa and present a different theology? This is what we will try to understand next. If you want to understand a religion, look at its founder. But when it comes to Christianity, this rule takes you to an unexpected place, because the theological architect of Christianity, believed by billions today, is not Eesa. It is a man who never saw Eesa, never spoke to him, and did not believe in him during his lifetime. His name is Paul, and the city where he was born is at the center of this story, Tarsus. Today, we know Tarsus as a small district of Mersin, but in the 1st century AD, Tarsus was one of the most important intellectual centers in the world. At that time, there were 3 major university cities in the world: Athens, Alexandria, and Tarsus. The 3 biggest library cities were the same. Science, philosophy, literature, religion, all of these were discussed, taught, and transformed in this place. And in this center, a very special philosophical tradition existed: Stoicism. Stoicism was a school of thought that was influenced by the Mithra cult and later became a systematic philosophy. Universal reason, virtue, fate, life after death, all of these were explained within its framework. And Paul grew up in this city. He breathed this intellectual atmosphere. He absorbed the concepts of Stoic philosophy. At first, Paul's name was Saul, and Saul was one of the strongest enemies of the early followers of Hazrat Eesa alayhi salam. He persecuted Christians. He had them arrested. He witnessed the stoning of one of the first Christian martyrs, Stephanos. In some sources, it is even written that he killed Christians. But then, something happened on the road to Damascus. According to Christian belief, while going to Damascus, he saw Eesa in the sky and heard his voice. And after this experience, everything changed. Saul became Paul. But there is a critical point. Paul never actually saw Eesa in real life, yet after seeing him in the sky, he recognized him and promised to become a true Christian. And of course, the only witness of this story is Paul himself. There are no secondary sources who saw or heard this event. So in this story, whether he truly experienced it or created it, Paul gave himself a special position. One of the most important periods of Paul's life begins here. We do not know if he told this story to Barnabas. Maybe it was something he spoke about later. Barnabas came to Tarsus and found Paul. He took him with him to Antioch. They worked together for a full year, and in Antioch, for the first time in history, the followers of that community were called Christians. Barnabas was someone who learned directly from people who knew Hazrat Eesa alayhi salam and wanted to pass on his message exactly as it was. Paul, however, was thinking in a very different way. The philosophical education he received in Tarsus made him think in a systematic way, and Paul began to redefine who Eesa was. Barnabas was against this. Barnabas saw Eesa not as the Son of God, but as a messenger of Allah. The belief in one God was a non-negotiable foundation for him, and at this point, the distance between him and Paul became impossible to close. Sources tell us that Barnabas and Paul separated and never came together again. Paul continued his missionary journeys. He wrote letters. He established churches. The letters he wrote now form an important part of the New Testament. And the main doctrines of Christianity today, the Trinity, the theology of the cross, the divinity of Eesa, are largely shaped by Paul's writings. Barnabas, on the other hand, returned to Cyprus, and the book said to be written by him was telling a completely different story. So how did what Paul said become accepted, while the belief in one God held by Barnabas and many early Christians was pushed aside? This is exactly where we must look at history. In the year 325 after Eesa, the Council of Nicaea was held, and a decision was going to be made which Gospels were true and which were false. Think about it, 300 years passed after Eesa. And only then the doctrines of Christianity and its book were decided. This alone is a serious issue, and the ones who gathered this council were the same Roman Empire that had persecuted and killed Christians for years. The capital of the Roman Empire was no longer Rome. It was being moved to Constantinople. Emperor Constantine was on the throne, and he needed something to hold together his collapsing empire. That tool would be religion. But which religion? Which Eesa? Which gospel? Emperor Constantine sent invitations across the empire. All Christian leaders would gather in a small city in northwest Anatolia, Nicea. According to sources, 2,048 religious leaders attended this meeting. And in front of all of them, there was one central question: who is Eesa? Around this question, two main groups formed. On one side, those who said Eesa is God himself, or the Son of God. On the other side, a much stronger opposing voice was rising: Arius. Arius said, there is only one God, and Eesa is his messenger. But the idea that Eesa is the Son of God is wrong. Historians emphasize that the real purpose of this council was not to find theological truth, but to organize and control the church. The Roman Empire had tried for years to stop Christianity by force, but when force did not work, they understood they could not destroy it from the outside. So they decided to control it from the inside. In Rome, there was already a powerful figure, the sun god Apollo. During the Council of Nicaea, a new figure was shaped to take that place, Eesa, but not as a simple prophet anymore, as a divine figure, as God himself or his son. Churches were built on the places of old pagan temples. Pagan festivals were aligned with Christian celebrations. At the end of the meeting, a historic decision was made. From hundreds of Gospels, 4 were selected: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. What happened to the rest? They were burned. destroyed, labeled as heretical, blasphemous, or dangerous. In the year 366, Pope Damasus took an even stronger step. He completely banned the Gospel of Barnabas. It was placed among apocryphal texts, meaning rejected and unsafe, and this ban continued for centuries. In medieval Europe, especially during the Inquisition in Spain, people who even mentioned the name Barnabas could face the death penalty. So what happened to Arius? Arius and those who followed his ideas did not just lose a debate. The Council's decisions were very clear. All texts and notes containing these beliefs had to be destroyed. Those who believed in Arius's views were excommunicated and punished, but the question he asked did not die. Is Eesa really the Son of God? This question was suppressed in Nicea, but it never disappeared. For centuries, it continued to be whispered. The idea that today's Gospels are not revelation texts is not only a claim made by Muslims or researchers. Even Christian theologians accept this. The four canonical Gospels we have today, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are texts that describe the life and words of Eesa. But the way they were written is very important. They were written generations later. In other words, they were written by people who saw those who saw Eesa. So the format is like this. Eesa said this. Eesa did that. This happened that day. We saw this. This may look similar to hadith in the Islamic tradition, but it is not the same. Because the name of the person who directly heard from Eesa is not clearly given, and there is no clear chain of people confirming the narration. In Islamic literature, hadith are recorded with detailed chains: who heard it, who confirmed it, and whether these people are reliable. But in the Gospels, there is no such system. Because of this, their reliability is much lower compared to hadith. In fact, they cannot even be compared. Also, all four canonical Gospels are anonymous. Even though they are given the names of apostles, they were not actually written by those apostles. And choosing those names makes it look like a form of manipulation. Even hadith, despite being very strong in Islamic literature, are not considered revelation. So we can say this clearly. Today, Christianity doesn't have a fully preserved revelation book. There is another very important point. Eesa alayhi salam is believed to have passed away around 30 AD. So, when were the four Gospels written? The Gospel of Mark, considered the earliest, is dated around the year 70. That is at least 30 years after Eesa. And even this dating is only a claim. There is no strong physical proof or carbon test confirming it. The Gospels of Matthew and Luke are dated around the year 90, and the Gospel of John is dated between 100 and 130 AD. Not only are the authors unknown, but they were also not direct witnesses of Eesa, and in some cases not even direct witnesses of those who saw him. This is widely accepted in modern theological studies. Now think about this. You see an event and tell it to someone. That person tells it to another, and later someone writes it down in anonymous notes. Do you think it would be exactly the same as what you originally said? Can you say it was transferred 100% correctly, especially when we do not even know who transmitted it and who confirmed it? Everything is passed anonymously. Would you not question its reliability from the beginning? Now imagine this. After 300 years, people come and choose from many versions, the ones that best fit their beliefs and allow an easier transition for society. There were hundreds of versions, and the ones closest to pagan beliefs were selected, because at that time, Rome was pagan. And the transition required texts close to their existing beliefs. This is a major issue. It is one of the most serious things that can happen to a religion. And the prophet of that religion, he did not see these books, did not hear them, and did not confirm them. So not only are they not revelation, they are not even approved by the one who received revelation. Shouldn't this raise serious doubts? Now look at the Quran. It was written down directly under the guidance of the Messenger of Allah. Then it was read many times, memorized and constantly repeated in Salah and outside Salah. Those who memorized it compared it with each other. So in terms of authenticity, it was confirmed both by the Prophet and by thousands of people who memorized it. And in this way, it was preserved and passed to later generations. The Quran mentions the Gospel, a book revealed to Eesa. But this book is not Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. The Gospel mentioned in the Quran is the one directly revealed to Eesa, and this is where the Gospel of Barnabas comes into the picture. Because this book makes a very specific claim about itself. In its introduction, it says, "I, Barnabas from Cyprus, write faithfully what was revealed to the Messiah by Ruhul Qudus from the Lord of the worlds, exactly as I heard from Eesa, as the fourth copy after 48 heavenly years." This statement does not exist in any of the four canonical Gospels. Barnabas clearly says, "This is revelation." Now let's address a claim made by the Vatican, that the Gospel of Barnabas was written by Muslims. This claim is historically weak. Because the Gospel of Barnabas was banned in the year 366 AD, but Islam began in 610 AD. So this book was already banned before Islam even appeared. So now we come to the most critical question. What is written in the Gospel of Barnabas that made it so dangerous that it was removed from the religion, even though it was said to be written by a respected saint? To ban a book, there must be a very strong reason. It is not enough to just say it is wrong. It is not enough to say, this contradicts our belief. Because throughout history, many books were criticized or rejected, but they were not destroyed. But the Gospel of Barnabas was different. It was targeted for destruction. It was banned for centuries. Even saying its name could lead to death. It was searched for in armed night operations. Even its introduction alone is enough. The Gospel of Barnabas begins with this sentence: "I, Barnabas from Cyprus, write faithfully what was revealed to the Messiah by Ruhul Qudus from the Lord of the worlds, exactly as I heard from Eesa, as the fourth copy after 48 heavenly years." This single sentence contains three major claims. First, revealed by the Lord of the worlds. This book defines itself as revelation. This claim does not exist in any of the four canonical Gospels. Second, revealed to the Messiah through Ruhul Qudus, meaning revelation sent to Eesa through Jibril. Third, I write as the fourth copy. It says there were four copies of this text. The main claim of the Gospel of Barnabas is this: Eesa is not the Son of God. This directly contradicts the doctrine officially established at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. According to the Gospel of Barnabas, Eesa is a chosen servant and messenger of Allah. He performs miracles, shows people the right path, and carries the divine message. But he is not divine. The Gospel of Barnabas also claims that Eesa was not crucified. Instead, it says that Judas Iscariot was made to look like Eesa and was crucified in his place. This claim is very similar to what is described in the Quran. In the Gospel of Barnabas, Eesa is also described as giving good news about a prophet who will come after him. And this prophet is named Ahmad. In translations, it is mentioned that those who believe in Ahmad will be like full ears of grain. The name Ahmad means the most praised in Arabic. The name Muhammad comes from the same root. In the Quran, there is also a verse pointing to this. In Surah As-Saf, verse 6, Eesa says, "I give you the good news of a messenger who will come after me, whose name will be Ahmad." The Gospel of Barnabas describes this message in more detail. According to some narrations, this book also contains information about where older sacred texts are located. One of them is the Psalms written by Dawood in Aramaic. The other is the 10 Commandments written by Harun on copper tablets. The location of these tablets has remained one of the greatest mysteries in the world for centuries. We just mentioned Hamza Hodja. Now let's answer these questions. Who is he? How did he reach these copies? How were they translated? How was this Gospel of Barnabas verified? And how can we believe its authenticity today? These copies were found in two different places, at two different times, by different people. The first one was found in 1983 in the southeast of Turkey, in the province of Sirnak, a mountainous, harsh, isolated land. A villager notices something while grazing his sheep. One of them is missing. He follows the trail and reaches a cave. But this is not an ordinary cave. Sources say that this place was actually a very large structure, almost like an entrance to an underground city. And inside this place, there was something the villager did not expect: a tomb. On top of the tomb, there was a large book, covered with leather, yellowed pages but somehow preserved. There was writing on it, a script he did not understand at that moment. Later it would be understood. It was an Aramaic text written in the Syriac alphabet, the language spoken by Eesa. The villager did not know what the book was, but he understood it was valuable. He told people around him, but soon this reached the gendarmerie, and the book was taken by official authorities. The news that the Gospel of Barnabas was found in Turkey somehow spread, and this news alarmed the Vatican. Through its embassy in Ankara, the Vatican sent an official letter to the Turkish Ministry of Culture. They asked for information about the book. The ministry investigated, and the response sent to the Vatican was, "We do not have the Gospel of Barnabas." Think about this. One of the most powerful religious institutions in the world is asking, through official diplomatic channels, about an ancient book found in a mountain village in Turkey. This alone says a lot. The book was first kept at the Diyarbakir Marshal Court. It stayed there for a few years. Then it was sent to Ankara, and in Ankara it reached the highest levels of the state. Sources say the book was taken to the General Staff headquarters, and from there to a secret headquarters in Besiktas, claimed to belong to a special military unit. And there, it was translated by Hamza Hodja, a gospel, a military headquarters, and secrecy. Some people are forced to carry the heaviest secrets in history. They do not choose this burden. The burden finds them. Hamza Pektas, known publicly as Hamza Hokagil, was one of those people. He was an expert in ancient languages. He could read Aramaic. When he returned from Germany in 1984, a man named Ismail Hakisengul came to his door with a text, and when he saw it, he did not step back. He paid the price of this decision for the rest of his life. He passed away in 2021. For security reasons, he hid his real surname throughout his life. According to his own words, "When I returned to Turkey from Germany in 1984, someone named Ismail Hakisengul brought me a text. It was an Aramaic text written in the Syriac alphabet. During the translation, this meaning appeared: I write what was revealed to the Messiah by Allah, the Lord of the worlds, exactly as I heard from him after 48 years. In his own words, this text became very well known, and I translated the first part of the Gospel of Barnabas in this way. Sources say that after the book entered state control, Hamza Hodja was taken to a special place for translation. This was not an ordinary government building. It was a secret headquarters in Besiktas, claimed to belong to a special military unit. And inside this place, Hamza Hodja translated the Gospel of Barnabas, a religious text, a military base, and an oath of secrecy. Hamza Hodja mentioned which generals were involved in this process. He gave names. He described locations he was taken to by helicopter. These details were recorded and published. But then, something very unusual happened. In 2009, the journalist who published this information received an email. Some parts of the information in the old video of the teacher have been removed. The journalist checked the video and saw it clearly, the parts where the names of generals were mentioned. all deleted. In 2021, Hamza Pektas passed away. After that, there was no longer a need to hide his real surname. The man who had been known for years as Hokkagil was finally revealed to be Pektas. A man carried one of the most important secrets in history. He hid his identity, he stayed out of sight, and despite all this, he still told the story. Not only one copy was found in Turkey, a second copy was found in 1996, and its story is also very unusual. Let's follow it together. One night. In the north of Cyprus, outside the city of Famagusta, near the ruins of Salamis, there's a small monastery. Everything is quiet. Then a sound. Someone knocks on the door. The security guard opens it and sees 13 men, all dressed in black, all holding automatic weapons. Their leader steps forward and says, "We will carry out an exercise here. You wait in the church across. Do not leave." What could the guards do? There is an armed group in front of them. Silently, they move to the other building, and the door of the monastery closes. No one sees what happens inside, but in the morning, freshly dug soil is seen in one corner of the monastery. But this story actually goes much further back. In the year 477, the Bishop of Cyprus, Anthemios, had a strange dream. In the dream, St. Barnabas appeared and said, "My grave is in that place, come and find me." Anthemios took this seriously. He went with his team near the ruins of Salamis, and he found what he was looking for, a cave. Inside it, a tomb. Inside the tomb, bones. And on the bones, a handwritten gospel. For centuries, this place was protected, until modern times. Researcher Hamza Yardimcioglu personally entered this cave. He saw the tomb. He saw the heavy marble block on it. It could not be moved until 1996. During filming in Cyprus, Yardimcioglu spoke with a worker who had been working at the monastery for 25 years. The man hesitated. Years had passed, but the fear was still visible on him. He did not want to speak. But finally he said, "Yes, that night there were soldiers here. They said it was an exercise. They sent us to the other building. In the morning we saw..." He did not finish his sentence. An investigation was started after this event, but shortly after, it was closed. So what was taken from the monastery that night? According to some accounts, the object removed was large and heavy, but these details are not officially confirmed. So only one question remains: what really happened that night? One of the people who followed this question was Kutlu Adali, a journalist from Cyprus. He wrote about this incident for many years. He asked, "What kind of exercise is this? What were they looking for in the church? What was taken from there?" After asking these questions, he received threats. But he continued writing, and one night, he was attacked with a gun in front of his home. He lost his life. His death was taken to the European Court of Human Rights. His family waited for answers, but the process ended in a controversial way. After this event, similar claims appeared in different places. During excavations in Tarsus, some officials and researchers said there were unusual developments. Various claims were made. For example, it was claimed that Professor Aytug Atici, a member of parliament from Mersin at that time, received warnings about this issue. But such claims are not officially confirmed. Officials visiting the excavation site were often told, "This is a sensitive matter, please wait." But the expected explanations were never given. Researcher and writer Refik Kutlua also points out important details about this topic. He says that the timing of some statements raises questions. But one thing is certain, there are many claims about these events. But there is no clear, open explanation that everyone accepts. And maybe the most important question is still the same. What really happened that night? And now, let's come to one of the most mysterious excavations of our time. Again, the location is Turkey, because this is the land where Paul and Barnabas stayed, the country where Mersin Tarsus is located. For many years, this region hosted early Christians. Because of this, excavations are carried out here, and important materials have been found. When November 2016 came, a very unusual and sensitive excavation began. In Tarsus, in a poor neighborhood, among small, damaged houses, a simple house with a metal roof, and in the middle of this neighborhood, a normal-looking house painted pink. The neighbors did not know what was under this house. They did not know who owned it. They did not know who rented it or why it was used. But one day, the door of this house closed, and sounds started coming from inside. Digging sounds. The excavation in Tarsus was carried out under a secrecy order. Officially secret. Officially closed. And officially, no one was allowed to approach. But secrecy did not stop curiosity. In a normal archaeological excavation, scientists work. Findings are photographed, recorded, and shared with the public. But in Tarsus, none of this existed. Instead, secrecy orders, armed security with long rifles, a closed area. Members of parliament wanted to go there. They were not allowed. Even the governor wanted to go. He was also not allowed. One of the most striking claims comes from what some members of parliament learned. They said that before the excavation, treasure hunters were already working there using coordinates sent directly from the Vatican. So the question becomes, how did the Vatican know what was under an ordinary house in Tarsus? Two archaeologists, whose identities were hidden, shared something unusual. Their voices were changed for security. They said, in the excavation area, very strong frequencies were being emitted, beyond what humans can normally hear. So strong that the team had to take special measures to protect their ears. Local residents also reported strange things. Phones and cars were often malfunctioning. Sometimes cars started by themselves. While members of parliament were waiting outside, security forces told them, "This is a national matter. Please wait. Our president will make a statement." If what was found was a normal archaeological discovery, the governor or the Ministry of Culture would explain it, but instead, they said, the president will explain. And that explanation never came. So right after this excavation, why did Recep Tayyip Erdogan go to the Vatican? In politics, there are no coincidences. When a head of state visits another country, it is usually planned months in advance. Unplanned visits are very rare, and when they happen, there is usually a strong reason behind them. Right after the Tarsus excavation, the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, visited the Vatican. The excavation became public in November 2016. It stayed in the news for a few days. Then, silence. And right after this silence, Erdogan met Pope Francis in the Vatican. Researcher Hamza Yardımcıoğlu and other sources do not see these two events as unrelated. Yardımcıoğlu asks, after the Tarsus excavation, why did Pope Francis meet Erdogan? This creates a chain of 3 links. First, the Vatican gives coordinates. Second, Turkey digs and finds something. Third, the president of Turkey visits the Vatican. This connection has never been officially confirmed, but researchers believe there is a link. During the time of the Tarsus excavation, the Vatican made a high-level statement. We do not have the Gospel of St. Paul or Barnabas. Researcher Refik Kutlua highlights this point. No one asked this question. No one asked the Vatican about it. So why did the Vatican feel the need to make this statement? In law, this is called a spontaneous declaration. Answering a question before it is asked often suggests that something is being hidden. In 325 AD, at the Council of Nicaea, the Gospel of Barnabas was banned. In 366 AD, Pope Damasus officially banned it. For centuries, even saying its name could lead to death. In 1982, it was found in Hakkari. The state took it. It was translated in a secret headquarters. In 1996, in Cyprus, an armed group came at night. In 2016, in Tarsus, something was found. It was covered with secrecy. The Vatican gave coordinates. The president went to the Vatican. No explanation came. The same reaction. For more than 1,000 years, the same reaction. The Vatican's counter-strategy, the 1907 operation. There are two ways to eliminate a truth. The first, destroy it physically. The second, replace it with something false. To move people away from the real truth, you give them a false version of it. And this second method is far more intelligent. For centuries, the Vatican tried to destroy the Gospel of Barnabas, but it could not fully eliminate it. So a more sophisticated strategy appeared. Today, there is a text known as the Gospel of Barnabas. It is sold in bookstores, found online, and translated into many languages. This text is known in Italian, but stop for a moment. Barnabas was a Jewish man from Cyprus. He lived in the 1st century. The languages spoken in Cyprus at that time were Aramaic and Greek. Italian did not even exist in his world, and Barnabas did not live in the 1500s. So the question becomes unavoidable. Where is the original of this Italian text? Every translation comes from an original source, but this original text has never been shown publicly. This known version created a very calculated effect. People said, the Gospel of Barnabas was found, but it turned out to be fake. And then they stopped searching for the real one. This was exactly the result the operation wanted. When we look at the full picture, a long-term strategy appears clearly. First step, destroy or hide the real text. Second step, silence those who have access to it. Third step, replace it with a controlled false version. Fourth step, label that version as written by Muslims. So anyone searching for the truth is automatically labeled as spreading propaganda, the copy in Israel and Rabbin's granddaughter. Some stories bring together people who seem completely unrelated. A Jewish man from Cyprus writes a book in the 1st century. Centuries later, a shepherd finds a copy in the mountains of Hakkari. Then a Turkish scholar translates it in a secret military location. And later, a woman from one of the most powerful families in Israel sees its content, and her life changes. According to Hamza Hodja, the Aramaic text he translated contained a very specific detail. The book was written in 4 copies, and the locations of these copies were written inside the text itself. First copy, found in Hakkari, Uludere. Second copy, in Israel. Third copy, in the Arabian Peninsula. Fourth copy, in northern Iraq. The name Hamza Hodja reached was Victoria Rabin, the granddaughter of Yitzhak Rabin. With the support of a German company, he shared his findings with her: the existence of the Gospel of Barnabas, its content, the issue of the 4 copies, and the location of the copy in Israel. Victoria Rabin took this seriously, and according to some sources, through her efforts, the copy in Israel was found. It is also claimed that after seeing the content of this text, she became Muslim, a member of one of the most powerful families in Israel, raised in the Jewish faith, close to the state structure, sees the Gospel of Barnabas, and chooses Islam. This claim is very difficult to verify. It is based mainly on the statements of Hamza Hodja, but such claims are often evaluated within the wider context surrounding the Gospel of Barnabas. Hamza Hodja also mentioned that he attended her funeral. This is a very striking statement, because if true, it suggests a direct connection between them. The importance of the Israeli copy is not only that it is another version of the Gospel of Barnabas. According to Hamza Hodja, this text also contains information about the location of 2 major sacred relics: the Psalms written by Dawood in Aramaic, the 10 Commandments written by Harun on copper tablets. These 2 objects are among the most sought-after sacred relics in the world. For centuries, archaeologists, treasure hunters, and religious institutions have been searching for them. And then there are the claims that those who see this book die. March 5, 2009, near the district of Goxon in Karamamaras, a snowy, harsh mountain area. The sky is cloudy, visibility is low. A helicopter crashes into the mountain. There are 6 people inside. All of them lose their lives. Among them is one of the most well-known and controversial figures in Turkish politics, Muhsin Yazıcıoğlu, the founder and leader of the Great Unity Party, and someone who said he had seen photos of the Gospel of Barnabas. The person who shared this story publicly is Ahmad Yenilmez. He had a personal connection with Yazıcıoğlu. After his death, he shared an important detail. 15 days before his death, Yazıcıoğlu showed him something. He took out his phone, opened the screen, and showed photos of the Gospel of Barnabas. Then he said, "Everyone who has seen this has died. Did you know that?" According to Yenilmez, there was another person present at that moment. He asked, "Did you see it too?" Yazıcıoğlu answered briefly, "We are seeing it." And 15 days later, he died in that helicopter crash. The investigation of the crash was discussed for a long time. According to the official explanation, the helicopter crashed due to bad weather. But there is a critical detail. The GPS system was not working. In a mountainous and snowy area, this is a major safety issue. So the question remains, why was the GPS not working? The official investigation did not give a clear answer. Around the Gospel of Barnabas, a pattern of deaths and tragedies is often mentioned. Kutlu Adali asked questions and was killed. Victoria Rabin is claimed to have seen the text and faced an alleged attack. Hamza Hoxha translated it and had to hide his identity. 2 unnamed archaeologists spoke. Their voices were altered, and Muhsin Yazıcıoğlu saw the photos and died shortly after. Some people see this not as coincidence, but as a pattern. Ahmad Yenilmez describes that moment with a heavy tone. Yazıcıoğlu looked at the photos. "We are seeing it." And 15 days later, 6 people died in a helicopter with a non-working GPS. What he thought in those 15 days, we do not know. We only know this: he saw the images, and then he died. More than 1,000 years have passed, since Nicea, since the bans, since the destructions, since the midnight operations, since the journalists who were killed, the politicians who were silenced, the scholars who hid their identities. And still, this book is here. This story is here. These questions are here. In this story, there are 2 discoveries in 2 different places, in 2 different times. In 477 AD, in Cyprus, a tomb found by Bishop Anthemios with a handwritten text on it. And in 1983, in Turkey, in Hakkari Uludere, a villager finds a tomb while searching for a lost sheep. Between these 2 discoveries, there are 1,500 years. They are hundreds of kilometers apart, and yet in both cases the same thing appears, an Aramaic text attributed to Barnabas, and in both cases the reaction is the same: take it, hide it, silence it. So what happens if this book becomes public? For the Christian world, the core doctrines would be questioned. The divinity of Eesa, the theology of the cross, the belief in resurrection, all would need to be reconsidered. The authority of the Vatican would be challenged. For the Jewish world, if the book contains information about the Psalms of Dawood and the tablets of Harun, this would create a major debate in Israel. For the Muslim world, this book would support key Islamic claims, that Eesa is a prophet, that the crucifixion did not happen as believed, and that Muhammad was foretold. When we look at the message of the Gospel of Barnabas, one central idea appears: one God, a chain of prophets, and that this chain continues: the God of Ibrahim, the God of Musa, the God of Eesa, the God of Muhammad. All the same, this message has the power to break the walls between the 3 Abrahamic religions, and maybe that is why this book has been suppressed for centuries. In the first century, Barnabas wrote what he heard from Eesa. He was killed, thrown into a swamp. His students saved him. In 477, Anthemios found him. In 366, the book was banned. Centuries passed. In 1983, a sheep was lost in Hakkari, and on a tomb, that text was found again. In 1984, Hamza Hodja translated it. He spoke about it, but he was silenced. In 1996, 13 armed men came at night in Cyprus. In 2009, Muhsin Yazıcıoğlu saw the photos. 15 days later, he died. In 2016, an excavation happened in Tarsus. Even the governor could not enter. Erdogan went to the Vatican. No explanation came. And today, this story is still here, an unbroken chain. The story of the Gospel of Barnabas shows something very clear. If a truth is strong enough, it cannot be completely hidden. You can ban it, you can burn it, you can silence it, you can kill people, but you cannot destroy the truth. Because truth lives in human memory, in human conscience, and in human curiosity. And as long as these three exist, no ban, no operation, and no false version can erase it completely.